All right, all right, all right. Very good morning, everybody. Let me just check if we are live. Just give me a moment. Yes. Okay, so we are live. We are live. We are live. Right. Good morning. A very good morning. Happy Dashera. Happy Dashera. Right. So today yet again I have curated a mixed bag of questions, kind of a section test style, and the idea of this is that it should give you some practice of what you can expect in your management exams as well. Um, Before we begin, though, allow me to take you through a very small, very quick introduction to the Unacademy platform. Unacademy, as you know, today is India's largest learning platform when it comes to preparing for any and every competitive exam. This YouTube channel is particularly for management exams such as your CAT, GMAT, NMAT, ZAT, IFT, and the likes. Right. I am Prankur Arora. I am going to be your instructor on this journey of learning. I'll be taking you through various aspects pertaining to verbal ability as well as reading comprehension. I have been in the learning industry for the past couple of years where I've had the opportunity to consult with various organizations such as Marico Limited, ITC Limited, um, PGCIL, Interglobe Air Transport, BD India, FMC Corp, various organizations where I contributed to different functions of learning and development. I'm also a published author, wrote a book called It's Not Funny, got published a couple of years back. It's a work of satirical fiction, so if you're fond of satire, if you're fond of dark comedic fiction, then be sure to check it out. It was even positively reviewed by the likes of Papa CJ and Biswapati Sarkar, comedy legends in the industry. Um, I also hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an American organization called Leadership Management International. LMI is the world's largest organization working in the space of leadership. And on the side, I run a company that I co founded. It's called Thought Sutra. The idea of Thought Sutra is to democratize the learning of creative arts. Right. So if you've got that creative bone in you, do check it out. Right. Um, there are quite a lot of features that add to the pedagogy of an academy and help it stand out and be a cut above the rest. Some of those features include giving you access to daily live classes, where you get to chat with your educators, engage in discussions and clear doubts, and answer polls. All that happens while the class is still going on. At the same time, uh, you can evaluate your preparation with regular uh, tests and quizzes, and what we do is we give you detailed analysis on your performance that helps you develop perspective about your learning journey. All the courses on the platform are structured courses. They are in line with the exam syllabus that you're preparing for. And with one subscription to the platform, you get unlimited access to anything and everything. All kinds of live and recorded courses that you can watch from the comfort of any of your devices. There are quite a lot of educators on the platform. All of these people are highly credible when it comes to mentoring students. They've mentored thousands and thousands of aspirants into top tier management schools over the years. Be it something like an IM or an MDI, XLRI, ISB. You name it, they've cracked it, right? Um, you can experience all the live classes on our platform for free. Start learning from the best in the class. New batches, new courses, they keep on going live on the platform. Plus, language is never a barrier. We've got educators who teach in vernacular languages as well. If you're not as comfortable with English, I'm pretty sure you can find somebody who's teaching in a regional language that you were brought upon. Plus, a really cool thing is that you design your own schedule when it comes to the platform. You can enroll in unlimited courses, set personalized schedules for yourself, and never miss a class. Uh, because we send you those timely reminders and those push notifications, right? Um, the idea is that, as I said, all interaction on the platform happens in real time, be it doubt clearing, discussions, even question answers are conducted in the form of live polls, right? So if the idea is it's an adrenaline rush, trust me, because you participate in the live polls to compete for a place on the leaderboard, which is broadcast to anybody and everybody who's attending that lesson, right? And as I said, we give you in-depth insights into the topics. The idea is in-depth insights into your performance on the tests and the quizzes that we conduct, because right, we give you stuff like the time you're spending on every question, right? Whether you're performing better in RC versus para jumbles, stuff like that, that'll help you develop perspective and tweak your learning journey if need be. Also, you'll see that throughout the class today, I'll be scribbling a lot of stuff on the class notes. All these class notes with educator annotations, they're made available to you once you subscribe to the platform. Right? Talking of subscription, these are the various subscription models on which Unacademy works. You can clearly see that as the time period of your subscription goes up, the cost of your subscription per month is going down dramatically, right? Um, the idea is that if you're preparing for, say, 2021, I would recommend you opt for at least a 6 month or a 12-month journey, because we understand that preparing for such an exam is a long undertaking. It's a huge undertaking. So give yourself that comfort of time. Plus, if you use my name Prankur, you get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you're going for. Having said that, let's begin with the lesson for the day. This is a sentence correction question. The first question is a sentence correction question. We can clearly see that this is a comparison question. Try to figure out what it is we are comparing. This is a comparison question. What are we comparing though? Right. So we know for a fact, let's read the sentence. Because of the sharp increases in the price of gold and silver, the value of Monica Taylor's portfolio rose as her daughter in laws dropped. Right. So what are we comparing? Are we comparing Monica Taylor? Are we comparing Monica Taylor's portfolio? Or are we comparing, as the question demands, the value of Monica Taylor's portfolio? Right. We know for a fact we are comparing value. Value of MT's portfolio folio versus value of her daughter in law's portfolio. Right. So we know for a fact we are comparing the value of Monica Taylor's portfolio versus the value of her daughter-in-law's portfolio. Right. as her daughter-in-law's dropped. Daughter-in-law's what? Daughter-in-law's portfolio. So with an apostrophe s, we know for a fact this is referring to the portfolio, right? But we know for a fact, what are we comparing? We are comparing, I'll use another pen for this. We are comparing value versus value, right? So the value of Monica Taylor's portfolio rose as the value of her daughter-in-law's portfolio dropped should be the case. As her daughter-in-law's portfolio dropped does not make sense because you're comparing value of one portfolio to the to the daughter-in-law's portfolio, but that does not make sense. We want to compare value with value, right? So we eliminate option A. While her daughter-in-laws has dropped, again, this is what daughter-in-laws means. We are referring to daughter-in-law's portfolio, but there is no mention of value here either. So we eliminate B. As there was a drop in her daughter-in-laws, again, we're talking about the portfolio, but we're not talking about the value in option C either. While that of her daughter-in-laws dropped, that here refers to the value. Value of Monica Taylor's portfolio rose, while that is referring to the value, while that of her daughter-in-laws dropped. Again, daughter-in-laws here refers to the portfolio and that here refers to the value. So D is making sense as the comparison is complete. In all the other sentences, in all the other options, the comparison was not complete as it dropped for her daughter-in-laws. Again, as it dropped for her daughter-in-laws does not kind of make sense, because the idea is that we want a comparative comparison to be charted out, as here does not really create that contrast, while creates that contrast. So we eliminate option E. All right, so therefore D is the only viable option here. Hope I've made the case and that you've understood. Let's move on to the next question. This is a parajumbles question now. Right, hope. Yes, I'm here. Soumya, hi, welcome to the lesson. Solving this parajumbles question, are you here? If you're here, if you're solving the question, then please respond on the chat with your answer and then we'll discuss it. Right, so let's read the sentences here and figure out what should be the most ideal arrangement of these sentences. Sentence 1. Stat signaled something measurable while Matic advertised free labor, but Tron, above all, indicated control. So we know for a fact we are introducing Stat, Matic, and Tron. Let's go through the rest of the sentences and see if any of them carry such a reference so that we know for a fact that they form a link. It was a totem of high modernism. It was a totem of high modernism. The intellectual and cultural mode that decreed no process or phenomenon was too complex to be grasped, managed, and optimized. Like the heraldic shields of ancient knights, these morphemes were painted into the names of scientific technologies to proclaim one's history and achievements to friends and enemies alike. The historian Robert Proctor at Stanford University calls the suffixtron along with matic and stat embodied symbols. Embodied is a very it should kind of give you some context, right? To gain the suffix was to, so we know for a fact options 1, 4 and 5 are all talking about the suffix 1, 4 and 5. Now we're left with 2 and 3. Out of these, one goes with three sentences, these three sentences, and one does not. That one is going to be the odd one out, right? So, like the heraldic shields of ancient knights, these morphemes were painted into onto the names of scientific technologies to proclaim one's history and achievements to friends and enemies alike. It was a totem of high modernism, the intellectual and cultural mode that decreed no process or phenomenon was too complex to be grasped, managed, and optimized, right? So we can clearly see that when we say to gain the suffix was to acquire a proud and optimistic emblem of the electronic and atomic age, plus the idea that the historian says that these were embodied symbols. These are kind of hints for what we are mentioning in sentence 3. In sentence 3, we're talking about how, heraldic shields of ancient knights, these morphemes were painted onto the names of scientific technologies to proclaim one's history and achievements to friends and enemies, right? So it was an optimistic emblem, it was a proud emblem, it was an embodied symbol, right? So these are kind of talking about what we're mentioning in sentence 3 also. So 3 probably also goes with the first three sentences. Sentence 3 goes with 1, 4 and 5. 2 is talking about something that kind of has no context. What was a totem of high modernism, right? What was it, right? So we don't have context here, whereas 1, 4 and 5 are clearly going together because all three are talking about the suffix. Sentence 3 is talking about what we're talking about in 4 and 5. 2 is irrelevant, it is out of scope for the paragraph, so we go with option 2 as the odd one out. Next question. Again, this is a parallelism question. You have to make the verbs parallel. This is a parallelism question. None of the attempts to specify the causes of crime explains why most of the people exposed to the alleged causes do not commit crime, when conversely, why so many of those not so exposed. So we know for a fact we are talking about two groups of people. One is the 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 kind of people who are exposed to the alleged causes of crimes and they do not commit crimes, right? One group is the group that is exposed to the causes yet they don't commit crimes, and then there's the second group that is not exposed to the you know causes but they commit crimes, right? Not exposed, and here I will say exposed, right? Not exposed commit crimes, exposed don't commit crimes, right? So when we have to kind of form a contrast here, when we have to make them parallel, we say they don't commit crimes and they do, or rather they commit crimes. Do is a verb that is parallel with don't, right? And when we are using do, we don't have to repeat the idea of committing crimes yet again, because when we say one group does not commit crimes and the other group does, or the alleged causes do not commit crimes, the other group, not so exposed, do. Right? We can use do here to be parallel with don't. Do not and do. Commit crimes को repeat करने की जरूरत नहीं है sentence में दोबारा. Right? So that is why the answer option here that makes the maximum sense. The verb that should fit in here should be parallel with do not, and the only thing that is parallel with do not is do. Right? Let's move on to another question. This is a subject verb agreement question. I'll give you a hint. It is an SV agreement question. Iguanas have been an important food source in Latin America since prehistoric times. And what are we talking about? What is the subject, main idea here? Iguanas. Iguanas is plural, right? Iguanas have been an important food source in Latin America since prehistoric times. You got a plural subject, so we need a plural pronoun. It is singular. And it is a singular, still prized as a game animal. Again, as a game animal, we are talking about iguanas, we are talking about a plural subject. So, therefore, this is eliminated. They are still prized as game animals. They are still prized as being a game animal. Being a game animal is again singular, does not make sense at all. So, we eliminate 4. Being still prized as a game animal is again not going with iguanas, the plurality of iguanas. So the only answer that makes sense is option 3, where we have a plural pronoun. They are still prized as game animals. Talking about iguanas, and we are using plural for animals also. So therefore, this kind of makes the maximum amount of sense. Move on to the next question. Any of the following, if introduced into the argument as an additional premise, if you add it to the argument as premise, it should make the argument logically correct, right? Except, so that means we are looking at 4 out of 5 going along with the argument as premise. One does not. Which one doesn't? You have to figure that out. So let's read the argument now. Kale has more nutritional value than spinach. So we know for a fact kale has more nutritional value than spinach. But since collard greens have more nutritional value than lettuce, collard greens have more nutritional value than lettuce, it follows that kale has more nutritional value than lettuce. So now we have a relationship between kale and spinach, and we have a relationship between collard greens and lettuce. And the conclusion is between kale and lettuce, right? Kale has more nutritional value than lettuce. So ideally, uh, wait, I'll just correct this. So ideally, out of these five, four options should be helping us establish a relationship between kale and lettuce. We have the relationship between kale and spinach. We have a relationship between collard greens and lettuce. So, the option or what we need to add to our premise is something that helps us establish the relationship between kale and lettuce also. Because right now we don't, right? Colored greens, option A. Colored greens have more nutritional value than kale. If colored greens have more nutritional value than kale, we are saying C is greater than K, right? C is greater than K, but does that tell us or does that help us establish a relationship between K and L? I don't know. Kind of doesn't, right? Let me look at other options and figure it out. Option 2. Spinach has more value than lettuce. This says spinach has more value than lettuce. We know for a fact K is greater than S, and if S is greater than L, kind of follows that K is greater than L also, right? So this is correct. Spinach has more nutritional value than collard greens. Here we are saying S is greater than C. We know for a fact that K is greater than S, and if S is greater than C, kind of follows that K is greater than C, and if K is greater than C, then it follows that K is greater than L as well. So this is also correct, right? And then we have spinach and collard greens have the same nutritional value. What do we have? We have spinach and collard greens have the same nutritional value. S is equal to C. If K is greater than S and if S is equal to C, kind of follows that K is greater than C. And if K is greater than C, then obviously K is greater than L. So even this is correct. This also can be added to as additional premise. Kale and collard greens have the same nutritional value. Now we are saying K is equal to C. We know for a fact K is greater than S and K is equal to C and C is greater than L. So obviously K will also be greater than L. So even this can be added as additional premise. Colored greens have more. If C is greater than K, that is not telling us anything about whether K is greater than L or not, right? So this, if added to the premise, will not make the argument logically correct because then the conclusion becomes hazy. We need more information to conclude on K and L. Only with this option we cannot conclude on K and L. Alright. So out of these five, four if added to the premise will make the argument logically correct. This one will not. Right. Hope you understood this. Let's move on to the next question. We have to basically figure out the sequence of these sentences now. This is a parajumbles question. Read these sentences. If you're able to figure it out, hit me up on the chat with your answer. Otherwise, I'll explain it. Right. So let's look at all the sentences now. Um, Sentence number one. Metaphors may map to similar meanings across languages. Similar meanings. This is a hint that there has to be a callback to this, but their subtle differences can have a profound effect on our understanding of the world. Latin scholars point out carpe diem is a historic horticulture metaphor that, particularly seen in the context of its source, is more accurately translated as plucking the day, evoking the plucking and gathering of ripening fruits or flowers, enjoying a moment that is rooted in the sensory experience of nature, unrelated to the force implied in seizing. Okay. Uh, the phrase carpe diem, which is often translated as seize the day, and its accompanying philosophy, has gone on to inspire countless people in how they live their lives and motivates us to see the world a little differently from the norm. So we can clearly see that sentences 2 and 3 right now are talking about carpe diem. Sentence 4 is it's an example of one of the more telling ways. What's an example? What's an example, right? That should tell us the link to sentence 4, but knowing for a fact out of 2 and 3, one should be the opening of the paragraph. Now which one should be the opening of the paragraph is the question. Sentence 3 is introducing carpe diem, right, and its meaning. Sentence 2 is telling us, the context of the source. Sentence 2 is telling us about the source of the phrase, whereas 3 is telling introducing the phrase and its meaning. So 3 should be the first sentence obviously, and 2 should follow it, right? So 3 is introducing context, 2 is developing on it further. Now we have sentences 4 and 1, right? We have 4 as well as 1. From 4 and 1, we can clearly see that sentence 4 is talking about it's an example of one of the more telling ways that we mistranslate metaphors, right? 2 here is talking about how it is mistranslated, right? That the context or translation is plucking the day, right? And it is totally unrelated to the force implied in seizing the day, right? So fourth is actually telling us that this is an example of how we mistranslate metaphors, right? So 4 comes here, and then comes sentence 1, which is metaphors may map to similar meanings across languages, but their subtle differences can have a profound impact on our understanding of the world, right? So ideally it should be 3 2 4 1. That is what makes the maximum amount of sense, right? So let's look at another question now. This is an argument construction question where we have to figure out the assumption in this passage. Because no employee wants to be associated with bad news in the eyes of a superior, information about serious problems at lower levels is progressively softened and distorted as it goes up each step in the management hierarchy. The chief executive is, therefore, less well informed about problems at lower levels than are his or her subordinates at those levels. Because no employee wants to be associated with bad news, information is softened and distorted as it goes up. Chief executive, therefore, is less informed at lower levels than are his or her subordinates at those levels. So the idea is क्योंकि हायरार्की में ऊपर जाते हुए इन्फॉर्मेशन डिस्टॉर्ट हो रही है तो सीईओ को कुछ पता नहीं लगेगा कि नीचे वाले लेवल्स में क्या चल रहा है इज व्हाट द आर्ग्यूमेंट इज सेइंग. इधर अजम्पशन क्या है? अजम्पशन क्या है? पहली अजम्पशन जो मेरे दिमाग में आ रही है कि दे आर सेइंग चेन ऑफ कमांड में इंफॉर्मेशन कैसे ट्रैवल करती है. कि अगर कोई एम्प्लॉय है तो पहले उसके सुपरवाइजर को पता चलेगा, फिर मैनेजर को पता चलेगा, फिर चीफ मैनेजर को पता चलेगा, फिर जनरल मैनेजर को पता चलेगा, फिर एचओडी को पता चलेगा. इज व्हाट दे आर सेइंग. Can't the HOD directly talk to the employee, to the basic executive in the organization? Can't the CEO directly talk to the manager of a department, or the CEO only talks to the HOD? Right, so that is basically the chain of command is what the argument is basing its assumption on. Option A, problems should be solved at the level in the management hierarchy at which they occur. uh, should be वाली चीजें जो है ना, they can never be assumptions because that is not an assumption, that is an assertion. So we eliminate option A. Employees should be rewarded for accurately reporting problems. Again, not at all. C, problem solving ability is more important at higher levels than it is at lower levels. The argument is not talking about that at all. It is irrelevant. D, chief executives obtain information about problems at lower levels from no source other than their subordinates, is the assumption here. As I said, they are talking about the chain of command here. E, some employees are more concerned about truth than about the way they are perceived by their superiors. The idea again is that there is no information in the passage that gives us the hint to something like this. So we eliminate option E. Employees are more concerned about truth than about their perception. I mean, the passage is not talking about that at all. So D makes the maximum amount of sense as the assumption here. Alright, let's solve another parajumble question. Parajumble's question. Just give me a moment. Wait, let's look at the sentences. Sorry. We'll all live under mob rule. We'll all live under mob rule until then. Until when? Right? Until when is the question. Perhaps we need to learn to condense the feedback. Again, perhaps is a transitionary word. It cannot be the introductory sentence. Perhaps we need to learn to condense the feedback we receive online so that 100 replies carry the same weight as just one. As we grow more comfortable with social media conversations being part of the way we interact every day, we are going to have to learn how to deal with legitimate criticism. Again, so what is the sentence saying? The sentence is saying as we grow more comfortable with social media conversations being part of the way we interact, we are going to have to learn how to deal with legitimate criticism. This is kind of linked to when we say in sentence 2 that perhaps we need to learn to condense the feedback we receive online so that 100 replies carry the same weight as just one. Right? How to deal with legitimate criticism? This is the way we deal with legitimate criticism. This is one example. Sentence 4. A new norm will rise when it is considered unacceptable to reply with the same point that dozens of others have already. So we can say for a fact that 3 is the opening sentence, is talking about criticism and social media and kind of setting context. 2 is talking about one way to deal with criticism. Perhaps we need to learn to condense the feedback. How do you deal with it? You condense the feedback. If you get 100 replies, figure deal with it in such a way that they carry the same weight as just one reply. You're condensing feedback as a way to deal with criticism. Then we can say we can have sentence 4, which says a new norm will rise when it is considered unacceptable to reply with the same point that dozens of others have already. Why am I saying that? Because 1 and 4 are linked, and 1 has to follow 4, because 1 is saying we'll all live under mob rule until then. Until when? Until the new norm arises. Until when? Until we have the new norm, right? So that is this then is kind of referring to what we are saying in 4. So 1 has to follow 4, and 4 has to follow the pair of 3 and 2. So 3 2 4 1 is the most viable arrangement of these sentences. Yes, 3 2 4 1 therefore becomes the most viable arrangement of these sentences. All right, let's look at another question. The cake had lots of currants or currants. Exceptional or exceptionable behavior. So we know for a fact the cake had lots of currents in it. It cannot have currents. This is electricity, and these are the small cherries that you can find in your cakes. If you engage in such exceptional behavior, is when you're doing well, when you're doing a great job. That is exceptional. That this is the how you perform this task is exceptional. I will be forced to punish you. So we need a negative connotation here. If you engage in such exceptionable behavior, kind of makes sense, because then you're saying that what, out of the group you're the exception here. The rest of the group is doing really well. You're the one who is messing it up. Don't do this. So because we need negative connotation, we'll go with exceptionable and not exceptional. Exceptional has a positive connotation, a positive undertone. We know for a fact we have BB as the first two, so we can clearly eliminate option 4 already. He has the same capacity as an adult to consent or assent to surgical treatment. He has the same capacity as an adult to consent to surgical treatment. You give consent to it. You sign a consent form before you go for surgery. So then we have A. So we can clearly eliminate options 1 and 3 as well. Or rather, we have A here. So wait, we can eliminate option 3 right now. The minister is obliged to or compelled to report regularly to the parliamentary board. His analysis of the situation is far too sanguine. Sanguine makes sense when we're talking about analysis. And minister is obliged to or compelled to. This will define whether we go with option 1 or option 2. The minister is obliged to. It is an obligation of the minister to regularly report to the parliamentary board, right? The minister is obliged to report to the parliamentary board, makes sense, and therefore we have A here. So we have B, B, A, A, A. So we are going with option 2 here and not with option 1. This makes the maximum amount of sense. Let's look at another question. Choose the incorrect parts. Again, you have to type in the parts here, and this can have multiple parts. So, we know for a fact that whenever we're talking about additive phrases, the verb takes the form of the first subject, or the X as well as Y, or X in addition to X with Y, X along with Y, right? Whenever we have such additive phrases, the verb takes the form of X and not the form of Y. Wait, this will become confusing. Wait. Right. So we know for a fact that the verb has to take the form of the first subject, which is X. X, or rather Amrita as well as her parents, talks about the experience of living under the emergency room. So this is the incorrect part. The experience of living under the emergency rule is looks like a correct sentence. 21 months from June to March makes sense. From X to Y. 21 months from X to Y. Whenever we are talking about a time period, whenever we are defining a time period, this should be singular. The verb should be singular. 21 months is a period of time. 21 months is a long time to create scars in a young democracy. Even this is incorrect. So 1 and 4 are incorrect. Right? So make note of the fact that whenever we are talking about time periods, we use a singular verb. Whenever we are using additive phrases, we refer to the first subject. We refer to the first noun that precedes the additive phrase. Next question. Which of the following, if true, most seriously calls into question the explanation above? So, what is the premise? What is the situation in the argument? In the last decade, there has been a significant decrease in coffee consumption. During the same time, there has been increasing publicity about the adverse long term effects on health of the caffeine in coffee. Therefore, the decrease in coffee consumption must have been caused by consumer awareness of harmful effects of caffeine. So we know for a fact the situation is coffee consumption has gone down in the last decade. At the same time, they're saying awareness of the harmful effects of caffeine has gone up. So consumption going down, awareness going up, they're linking the two and saying that because of the awareness, the consumption went down. If any of the options actually gives us another reason for the coffee consumption going down, then we'll go ahead with that, right? Because that is what will weaken the argument here. That is what will tell us that there is no direct link between awareness of caffeine, awareness about caffeine, and the consumption of coffee, right? So option 1, on average people consume 30% less coffee today than they did 10 years ago. This can be a part of the premise, but this is not a weakening this thing, right? This can be part of the premise. This is giving us evidence कि पिछले 10 साल में 30% consumption गिरा है. B. Heavy coffee drinkers may have withdrawal symptoms such as headaches. We're not talking about withdrawal symptoms. C. Sales of specialty types of coffee have held steady as sales of regular brands have declined. They are telling us कि specialty type of coffee की sales have held steady, regular brands की decline हुई है, तो वो consumption गिरी है. They are telling us कि किस तरह की consumption गिरी है. Again, not really weakening the argument. D. The consumption of fruit juices and caffeine free herbal teas has increased over the past decade. Again, this is not weakening because this could go up even with coffee. No, what if people are taking coffee as well as fruit juice as well as herbal tea? Does not tell us that fruit juice and herbal tea has replaced coffee, right? E. Coffee prices increased steadily in the past decade because of unusually severe frosts in coffee growing nations. Kind of makes sense because demand can fall when the price goes up, right? Price went up, that is why consumption went down. Plus, severe frost हुआ है तो मतलब harvest भी कम हुई होगी coffee, right? So E kind of fits as something that can call into question the explanation above, that there is no direct link between awareness and consumption because coffee prices went up, because harvest went down, right? So therefore consumption decreased. So E is giving us an alternative reason, an alternate reason, and that is why it is calling into question the conclusion in the argument. All right, so with this, guys, I'll end the class here right now. With this, I'll end the class here for now, and I'll see you tomorrow again. Tomorrow morning, I'll see you again where we'll solve a few more questions pertaining to verbal ability portion of the exams. Right? Tomorrow, probably we could solve a reading comprehension. So if you're interested, join me again at 9:30 in the morning. Till then, take care. See you. Happy Dashera.